Welcome to Made for Mondays, the source for digging a little deeper into the Believers Church Sunday messages and finding ways to apply them to our daily lives. Together, let's take a deeper look and find a way to bring Mondays back.
Hey everybody, welcome to the pod. My name is Heather, and who's joining me today?
Hi there, Heather. It's me, Jamie.
Hi.
Hi, Heather. It's Megan.
Hi, Megan.
Hutton. No,
Yes, you got to
there's
clarify
so many of
around
us.
here.
There are.
Right,
Yep.
it's true.
Hi, Heather, Jamie, Megan, Hutton. I'm Joe. Nice to be on again.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone.
Good to have everybody. So, how are your weekends?
Ours was good. I mean, pretty low-key in the grand scheme of things.
Okay.
But we had Esther for a sleepover. So we had her Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I can't remember which it was. It's all a blur now.
Yeah.
It was exhausting, though. I mean, it's super fun. 'Cause
Yes.
she's very funny, and she knows how to make us laugh, and then she keeps doing the same stuff to make us laugh. So she's entertaining. But she's also just like non-stop.
Well, she's very busy.
She's very busy. She's got a lot to do and a lot to say. So,
Well,
yeah.
Last weekend, when you were on Sunday, you were sitting in the auditorium during rehearsal, and you were busily buying things off of
Yes.
Facebook Marketplace for the Queen to have at your house.
For the Queen and for the new one coming in January.
Yes.
So, yeah, Bonnie's.
Your house is turning into
It's so ridiculous.
nursery.
It is. We have a nursery room now that was like we were using it kind of like a utility room. It was like hanging, drying rack and all
Yeah.
these things. Like, think practical things,
Yes,
that you
for an
need
empty nester.
for an empty nester.
Yeah.
And now, and I was so happy to get rid of all that baby crap, and then
Now you're a granddad.
now I'm buying it all again. It's ridiculous. Yeah. Bonnie's on a rampage. She just keeps finding more things that this would be so great.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so you got some kid stuff.
I got some things you can have.
Oh, yeah, that's great. I'm
Alright.
buying stuff from Megan.
Yeah.
Yeah, she came over and gave me a double stroller tutorial on
Okay.
Saturday, so that was good. Yeah, figured it out. I managed to break it down and bring it back a couple times. So
Good.
Okay.
showed Sarah Beth how to do it. Yeah, we're good.
All right.
So yeah, that was my weekend. Granddaughter. Esther,
Good.
the Queen.
I know, and we're going to talk about it in a little bit, but we also had our family meeting, and
We did.
Esther had a lot to say.
She did. She always has a lot to say.
She was, I think, instructing you on how to lead the family meeting.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I pointed out that our budget, a large portion of it is for next gen to
Right.
teach.
Because she needs
She
Jesus.
needs Jesus. That girl. Yes, she
Yeah.
does. Yeah.
So that was good. Yeah. All right.
Great illustration of why we have a budget right
Correct.
there. Yep.
Correct. Yes. Megan, did you have anything fun going on this weekend?
Yeah, so the Huttons have like feast or famine weekends. I feel
Okay.
like the weekend before last, we had like nothing on our schedule at all. This weekend was like hit the ground running from Thursday on. So us on staff, I would consider Thursday night to be like our Friday
Yeah.
night
Correct.
because we
Yeah.
have Friday, Saturday off. So Thursday night, I had my first gig back with my friend Kelly. She just had a baby in
Oh, fun.
the beginning of July. So we played at Chuckamuck's. That's one of our favorite places to play. And Joey and his wife Lee were there
Nice.
with us too, which is fun. And then let's see, we had a yard sale on Saturday.
Oh.
Was it successful?
I mean, it was successful in that it started my husband's cleaning out the garage process.
Okay.
Just in time for our fall series.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm so excited for Less is More. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, he sold some stuff, but also took a big load to the donate afterwards. So,
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we need to do that about 5 more times
Okay.
to
Okay.
make headway in the garage. But yeah, then I had another gig Saturday night over at the Decoys, which was pretty wild. But yeah, it's a great place to be like, hey, you want to come to church with me tomorrow morning?
Yeah.
Right.
It's awesome.
So yeah, it was a packed weekend for us.
Good.
You could point to some of them and say, you need Jesus. Just like I point to Esther.
There were quite a few.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's the same idea.
Yeah.
It's just in a different
They
place.
are always surprised to hear that I sing at church. They're
Yeah.
like, "What? Yeah, you should come."
You saw my dad there too that night.
Yes, I did. I
Just there,
might have
just
sent.
following y'all around, I guess.
I might have sent a little video of his dad dancing.
Oh,
Where I get my moves from, I guess.
That's where I get my moves.
Yeah, my weekend, great way to put it, feast or famine, because the last 2 podcasts, I started to really feel like Jamie. Like you get
Yeah.
to me,
Got
like,
nothing.
and you're
I
like,
got nothing to report.
I'm doing my lawn.
Yeah,
That's what
yeah.
you've been
That
saying.
was last week. Yeah,
Yeah.
And
My
but this-
muscles are sore.
I'm
I'm
sore.
doing
I
my-
feel good though. I feel great. I feel rejuvenated. And I'm going to share a little bit about this later, but I can't do nothing for too long before I just go stir crazy. So this weekend was super fun, like perfect balance of a little bit of rest, great family time. Also got to go out a couple times. Saw Megan play Thursday night, and I threw a big fuss about this on Thursday in the office. I was like, not going out that far. It's too far away. We're not going out there. We're going to try this new place right over here in Bridgeport instead and all this. And, of course, lost that fight. When wifey wants to do it like that, it's just going to happen. So, yeah,
So I-
lost that, and she ended up seeing
I
us
thought this
there.
was hilarious. So some of us, when we need a little mental break around the office space, we take a walk around. And the weather was so nice Thursday. So a few of us went and walked around, and somehow we got on the subject of our favorite movies. And they're like, "Megan, what's your favorite comedy?" And when they put me on the spot, I'm always like, "I don't know." And I'm like, "I guess White Chicks." And so later
It's a good one.
when he decided they were coming to Chuckamucks, he just sends me a GIF of White Chicks. We'll be there.
Yeah, that was
I
perfect.
died.
Perfect time.
Perfect.
Yeah, I lost that fight. So, yeah. And then, had a great rest of the weekend. Just like I said, got to spend some good family time and spend time with the kids. That's always great. But then yesterday was supposed to be like a pool day. We're running short of those. And I told her when we got home from church, I'm staying with the little one. You can take him, go to the pool.
Yeah.
I'm done for the weekend.
There you go.
I'm done.
Nice.
Yeah.
So we celebrated our 20th wedding anniversary
Yeah.
on
Ooh,
Saturday.
congratulations.
Yeah, it was very fun. And Nate had a whole day planned.
Nice.
So we
Attaboy.
went down to Cure in P-Town, which I love going there for breakfast. But then they were doing the Seawall art show and the classic car show,
Oh,
which
fun.
is so fun to do. But we were walking through the car show, and I'm not going to remember the car. Nate's going to be so irritated with me. But so there's this car in the show, and Nate was like, "Babe, I think this was the car that was sitting in our Greendale house garage before we bought the house." And Nate was like, "I wonder if we could get this car to convey, like when we were going to buy it." And the agent was like, "Absolutely not. That car is going with the owner." So the owner walked up while we were looking at the car. And so Nate said, "Did you own the house on Greendale?"
on.
And he was like, "Yeah, I
Oh,
lived
wow.
there for however many years." And he said, "We bought your house. We lived in that house." And he was like, "Oh, that's awesome." And so we ended up talking to him for a good while. And it was just so fun.
Yeah.
We talked about some of the changes that we had made to the house. And he ended up looking at it when we sold it. And so he was like, "I loved what you did to this, this, and this." It was just really
Yeah,
fun to
that's
connect
cool.
with him. And they ended up moving from that house to when they bought a house on the water in Portsmouth. So anyway, it was just really fun to
Yeah,
talk with him.
That's cool.
And his car is beautiful.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, sorry, Nate, I don't remember. But yeah, so we walked around there for a while. That was really cool. And then we went to the Fuller Massage School to get massages. And if you haven't done that, that is a great place to go get a massage, because you can go for a student massage and get it for way discounted. And you can also go to the graduates, which they're very skilled. So, and still very discounted rates for really good massages. So we did that. And then we went to the Amber Lantern for dinner.
That's so good.
I've heard about
And-
that. Never
Yeah.
been there.
Oh yeah, it's really, really, really good food.
Oh, nice.
And so yeah, we enjoyed that dinner. Had Nate got the ahi tuna, which is his favorite thing to get anywhere. And I had their gnocchi carbonara. It was so good. So it was just a really lovely day. Got to celebrate all the things.
Nice.
And then we decided, oh my gosh, we've been on this like older movies kick. We've just been watching some old fun movies that we like to watch. But we were like, oh, let's pick a movie from 96 because that's when we got married. And so we were looking at the box office hits from that year. And the number one movie in the box office was Independence Day. So that's what we watched.
Does it hold up? Does it still hold up?
Our opinion was no, it doesn't hold up. But I was talking to Natalie Spangler on Sunday, and she was like, "Come on, that does hold up." So
I was going to say that's an unpopular opinion for our listeners.
It is an unpopular opinion. I am sure. Sorry about it, but
I don't do alien movies.
Yeah,
so,
you don't do alien movies?
No, it makes no difference to me.
Okay.
Independence Day, man.
Anyway, it was fun. It was a very fun weekend. So we mentioned that part of all of our weekends was our family meeting. We had a family meeting at the end of Sunday services to vote on our budget for the upcoming year. And we actually we haven't had one of these for a while, but this week we got a very important email that came in. We got this week what question.
True story. That is why Sam quit. Anyway.
I mean, that may or may not be true. But this is the question that we received. Hello, Made for Monday's crew. We email the engage notes to ourselves every week, so we read the very last entry next to the email button. This week it
Which
read...
is a great practice, by the way.
Yeah, it is a great practice. This week it read, ministry budget year to date. Budgeted $2,367,000. Received $2,360,427. What is the tangible effect to the church operations and ministry when our intake is below our budget? Longtime pod listener / viewer, Raymond of Kimberly and Raymond.
Yes. Such a great question.
Such a great question.
Thank you, Raymond, of Raymond and Kimberly. Kimberly and Raymond?
Kimberly and Raymond. He says Kimberly first.
Yeah. Okay.
Smart.
Yeah. Very smart. Yeah.
Very smart.
So a couple things on that. So the first thing is we're pretty conservative financially as a staff.
Correct.
So we're pretty tight with our dollars. We want to make sure that we're getting the greatest punch out of every dollar that we spend. And everyone on our staff really is pretty good at managing what their budget is. And so like the difference right now, it's pretty minimal. I think we're going to finish the year. It's like a 1.3%. We're off. We're under on the income side by about 1.5%. Which, in the grand scheme of things, we just didn't spend the money. And so it's not like we're going in the red. We're not dipping into reserves. We're not operating at a deficit. So that's the first thing. But the second thing is, the budget season is all about planning what it is that you're going to do as a ministry. And like there are fixed costs in the budget that you can't do anything about. So like the building is what the building is. Utilities are what utilities are. Staff are what staff are. So you have all these kind of fixed expenses that are baked into the budget. So the only lever that you can move is what you're spending on ministry. And really even that, like our global partners, we can't touch that. That's kind of like staff. So they're depending on those dollars for their survival where they are doing what they do. So really it's almost outside of outreach. So it gets to be a pretty small pool of things that just lose funding. And that's essentially what happens. And we have had seasons as a church staff where we have said, I know you've budgeted and made plans for certain initiatives, but before you pull the trigger on that, you got to get approval because we're running kind of lean. And so the reality is there are some things that just don't get done, things that staff thought this would be a really good thing to do, and we just don't have the funding to pull it off. So that's what happens when we go under budget. The good news, sort of, I guess good news is like we're at the last week of our fiscal year, so it resets in September. That's good and bad because the budget goes up just a smidge, and September's historically a really bad month for us financially.
Yeah, it is.
So you start a new budget that's a little bigger, and giving is generally a little lower. That's a terrible combination, and it starts our fiscal year off in the red almost every year I've been doing this.
Yeah.
And so it's challenging, and so I would just, I would encourage people who are giving here, like, to automate your giving is the best thing that you can do, because then our giving just becomes consistent, and when there's consistency, we can plan better. It's just very helpful. And people who are giving, it helps you to stay consistent in your generosity goals as well, because when September is such a busy month, I think sometimes, it just falls off the radar, or you're buying school supplies, or you're whatever it is. And so, if you can automate it, that's a pretty helpful thing.
Yeah, that's so good.
Joe,
Yes,
you have anything you want to add? Joe
What
crunches a lot of our numbers.
I know,
but-
and that was such a great plug for
Yeah.
me. I couldn't have said it any better.
Yeah. That's
Before
so
we
good.
jump in, I will say that I text your husband. It was a 1966 Dodge Challenger.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, it was beautiful. It's
What
like
color
a
was
gold.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
That is
Sounds
a great car.
It's a great
Yeah.
car. All right. Well, thanks for your question, Raymond. And if you have questions about anything we talk about on the pod or that you hear on Sundays,
Yep.
you can always submit them to madeformondays@believerschurch.org.
we would love to hear that. What from
Yeah.
Heather every week.
Yeah, every
Yeah, we
single
would.
week. Yeah, we love it. All right. So we are continuing our Bible reading challenge as well. And we are in Luke 14 through 16, actually. I put in the notes 14
week.
through
Yeah, it's a
15.
big
week.
week. What is
Big
going on
week.
with this reading plan?
I
It's
know.
like one chapter
Well-
one week and then 3 chapters the next.
I know, it's crazy. And if you're like Nate, he's asking, Luke, what were you doing with these chapter breakups?
Yeah.
But anyway, do you guys have anything that you took away from this week's reading so far?
Yeah, so I loved the parable of the lost sheep when it talks about how he leaves the 99 to go find the one. And what it kind of got me thinking about was like that's one of the songs that we sing, Reckless Love.
Yeah.
It says that exact thing. His love, he leaves the 99. And I love it because, well, it made me think of a couple things. One, on Sundays, it's hard for us to necessarily explain every single
Yeah.
song that we do. When we can have those opportunities to explain, a line like that, because somebody who's not familiar with the Bible is probably like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
It's great that when we can do that, but even, if someone comes in, hears this song, and then if they then come across that reading the Bible,
Yeah.
they're like, oh, that was in that song. And so they, have that connection to that. And a lot of the reading plan recently has some of our worship songs,
Yeah.
have come from that. Even the ones from last week, there were numerous worship
Yeah.
songs that came to my mind as I was reading those. So I thought that
Yeah, I love
was
that.
always a cool connection.
Yeah, I'll echo that. The prodigal son is one of my favorite stories in the whole Bible. It's very close to me and my family, and even what some of the things we're even going through today. So I get emotional reading through that. But it's countercultural, right? Like a lot of things are. Like would we leave the 99 to go after the one? I think it was perfect to tell that story right after talking through humility as well. It's a great example of that, and I just think that let's not get lost. Like the story is about the unbeliever and the one who hasn't repented of their sins, but I think that doesn't mean we can't, as believers, take something from it too, because we get lost. Mm-hmm. We get lost every once in a while, and when we are lost, He wants us back. Mm-hmm. And so like every time I hear that, I think of a couple of examples of people that I pray for that are close to me that are unbelievers. And I also think of myself too, that I've been lost. I've had seasons where I wasn't close to Him, and the people in my life that helped bring me back. So yeah. I love that story.
So
Yeah, it's such a good story. Years ago, when we were raised in sport to go to France, George Murray, who was one of my early mentors in ministry, he used to have a sermon on that message that was one of the best I had ever heard, and he gave me permission to use it. So I taught that message all up and down the East Coast. But it was such a good message, and the thing that I loved about it so much was he set the scene so well of like who's listening to it. So there's the religious people, and there's sinners and tax collectors. So that's the group of people that are listening. And as Jesus often did, the story was really more of a dig on the religious people and an invitation to the sinners and tax collectors. Because, and George would always end that sermon asking if you are the older brother. You know, like the focus of the story is the older brother who is annoyed at the grace and the lavish expression of love that the Father has for the lost one. And as much as we try to, like, I try to see myself in that story as the father type figure, it's so easy to fall into older brother persona and be so judgy of people that God is crazy passionate for. And so like I think it's always a healthy thing to try to view, like, read scripture not as like you always being in the hero seat, but to try to see what you really are like, you know. And it's easy to gloss over that. And so I love that story for that same reason.
And then to also know that, like, Jesus also loves the older brother.
Yes.
Like, he also is trying to, like,
right.
grab
He
the
wants
attention
him.
of
He
the older
wants him
brother
to be a
and
part
say,
of
like,
the celebration.
I have loved you this whole
Yes.
time. I've provided for you this whole time, and have wanted, like, I've been here for you the whole time as well.
Yeah. So like early in Luke 14, that same idea, there was this guy who's suffering from some kind of illness, and Jesus asks the Pharisees, the older brother of the prodigal story, is it permitted in the law to heal people on the Sabbath day or not? And they refuse to answer. And like just that, and then Jesus touches the man and heals him. And just that idea, like using religiosity to marginalize someone, which is the same thing that the older brother was doing. Like, so like in a sense, that story is a response to all of these things that Jesus is doing. And so he touches the guy, heals him, and then he turns to them and says, which of you doesn't work on the Sabbath? If your son or your cow falls into a pit, wouldn't you rush to get him out? You know,
do it. You would do it.
You would do that. And yet you're going to withhold goodness from someone that desperately needs it. And so, it's just, it's a very recurring theme in the life of Jesus, but it's also a recurring theme, I think, in our hearts, that we tend to put ourselves in a higher position and look down on someone else.
Yeah. Well, Megan, you brought this up before, but before we get into this Sunday's topic, Jamie, you started out the message by letting us know, kind of giving us a preview into our September series that we're going to be starting the second week in September.
Correct.
So can you just tell our listeners a little bit about that series and why we're excited about it?
Yeah, so less is more, based on the passage of John 3, I think that's correct. where John the Baptist, his disciples are upset that Jesus is baptizing more than them, and John says, that's the way it's supposed to be. I must become less and less. He must become more and more. And so that's the theme of the series, is scaling back things to make more room for Jesus. So here's a few of the topics. Less ego, more humility, less stuff, more generosity, less hurry, more rest, less worry, more trust. So if you know someone who's a worrier, or who's stressed, or who's strapped financially, or is just struggling with, just even humility, this idea of humility, man, what a great series to invite people to. And especially like the month of September is just always such a chaotic month with back to school and PTA meetings and all the things that you have to do in September, that we're gonna kind of counter culture that here on Sundays by just scaling everything back and quieting everything down and making space and room for people to just breathe and be and hopefully encounter Jesus in a more significant way.
Yeah. Our team's really put a lot of thought into this series. It's not a long series, and usually our team really does a lot with these kind of our longer series, but we've really been intentional about this series. Are you guys, Joe and Megan, are you excited about anything in particular with
Megan's
this series?
nervous.
Megan's nervous, but she's excited
Yeah.
too.
So when we first started our kind of overall planning for this series, the idea came up, we should, scale back the time of singing, not time-wise, but less
the production.
production.
Less production, yeah.
And at first I was like, yeah, that sounds really cool. And then when it came time to actually plan the things, I've been calling this series "Less is More" for Megan. More on Megan. But then I had to remind myself, no, the enemy doesn't want this to be good, and he's getting in my head about it. And the pieces are coming together. But yeah, I'm excited because our time of worship through singing is going to be much different than our norm around here. But I think it's a great way for us to kind of reset a little bit, because we've just been in kind of a routine of things. So I'm excited to see how it affects other people's time of worship. So.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning too, because we haven't had a communion service in a while. The very first Sunday of that is going to be Communion Sunday. So if you've been wondering, when are we ever doing communion? That's when we're doing it. And it's always just such a rich time when we do communion, and I'm excited for that.
Yeah, I think, Jamie, you said we're meeting them in a busy season, which is true, but I think we're also meeting them ahead of right around the corner, all the holiday season.
Sure.
So I think the back to school quickly turns into holiday, and it just makes these months, which are the best months of the year, fall is incredible, but it makes them so busy. So I think it's going to be really cool to meet them not only in a busy month, but then kind of reset, recalibrate heading into an even busier time right around the corner. And then, one of the ideas that we're going after is another free market, a fall free market this time. We haven't done that in a while. We usually hold that in the spring, but we didn't want to hold back because less stuff, more generosity. It's a perfect time for it, and we are trying very hard to.
John can just save all that stuff until then.
John's going to be so mad at me. He's like, why did you tell on me?
And we already plugged the free market, so here we go. He's got his back against the wall now. And we're trying really hard to partner with a local school to make that happen there. So be out in the community and show our generosity that way. So it's going to be a fun series.
It is going to be fun. Yeah, so next week we'll be wrapping up this series, and we're having one service at 10 o'clock, and that'll be followed by a great cookout and just wrapping up summer and going into Labor Day weekend. So we hope that you'll join us for that, and then we'll be going into Less is More. But for now, we're still talking about extraordinary nobodies, and this week we learned about...
Dorcas.
Or Tabitha.
But why would you call her Tabitha when you can call her Dorcas?
Or name you'd like to use. But Jamie obviously loves Dorcas.
Dude, such a great name.
Jamie, what's so inspiring about her character, or what's maybe so attractive about her? Yeah. Just tell us a little bit about
So there's not much said about her, honestly.
it
It's
really
like 5
isn't.
verses, I think, is the whole Dorcas story. But she was always doing kind things for others and helping the poor. That's the only description we have of her. And that's a pretty great description of someone who's just always doing kind things and always being generous towards those who don't have a lot. And yeah, she's inspiring for that. And like the end of the story, spoiler alert, but like you go to the funeral and she gets brought back to life, and you just like, that's incredible. Is it tied to her kindness? Like because of
right?
You kind of think maybe just because of how the story unfolds.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it was so remarkable that Peter, does this miracle at her funeral. Like it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, and I love that you talk through all of that and how like generous she is and all this stuff, and it can be so inspiring and so attractive, and yet like there's this flip side of it that can also make us feel like guilty about being generous, or it can make us have feelings of like resistance to it. So I'm just wondering, how have you guys seen or experienced that in your own lives? Like these feelings of guilt or resistance, like when you see people being very generous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was a perfect way to spell that out, because those are the exact feelings and kind of in the order that they go in. Very inspiring at first, and then you feel guilty. I often say that one of the worst things you can do is compare in life, play the comparison game and all that. But then, in thinking through this question, I didn't know what else to say. Like, is that guilt necessarily a bad thing? Is it always unhealthy? I mean, last week we talked about how generosity is contagious, and we know iron sharpens iron. So like, maybe it's just the wrong word. Like once you start feeling that guilt, now it is unhealthy, but there is some level of health to.
So the biblical idea around that is conviction, which is what the Holy Spirit does for us to point out things in our lives that are kind of out of sync with what he wants for us. Guilt and shame are our enemy,
right?
That heaps guilt and shame on you to cause you to feel bad, but not for the purpose of redemption, but for the purpose of just heaping shame and guilt on us. And a lot of us, I just got done listening to a Become New episode that was about shame and your inner critic and all that kind of stuff. But the enemy often uses that to neutralize us in a way, because it's demoralizing and it just paralyzes you.
Yeah, so you become apathetic.
Yeah,
almost.
conviction becomes this inspiring thing. Like, I want to become more generous. I am not as generous as I want to be, so I'm inspired to achieve this thing. That's what is born out of conviction, I think.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
That makes me think of when I feel like as a kid, generosity was like the opposite of my human nature. I know for a fact my sisters would agree, because I think back on, oh my gosh, when I was younger, I remember hiding stuff that I didn't want to share, or like getting so angry if somebody took something out of my room. It's like, no, that is mine. You better not put that back. But I feel like as I got older, God put people in my life who were just so generous to me, and it kind of, I guess I had a little bit of that guilt and the reminder of, well, I'm not really like that, but I want to be more like that. Yeah. Just being the, I guess, recipient of some people's generosity is like, okay, I want to be more like that.
Right.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
So you posed some great questions that we can all ask ourselves to see if consumerism has a grip on us.
Yeah.
Can you go over those with us again?
Yeah. So the first one was, do I often buy things I don't need or didn't plan to buy?
So I was in second service.
Yeah.
When you asked that question, there was like chatter happening. Did that happen in both services?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And I saw a lot of
yeah.
nudging going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we all have a tendency to do that. And I have you ever been to Buc-ee's?
Yes.
I talked about Buc-ee's.
I've never been.
You never been to a
No.
Buc-ee's? Have you ever? No.
I can't
So-
stand that crowd. I drove by it a couple of times. I'm
It's
like, I
insane.
can't do
It
that.
is insane.
Yeah, but it's amazing too. It's quite an experience. But if you've never been, there's like 140 pumps of gas for a gas station,
And, like
legit 140, 150
Yeah.
or more, and no trucks are allowed. So it's all car
Okay.
traffic.
And like when we've been, there's like a line onto the interstate to
Yeah.
get to
They
it.
Yeah,
often
see, that's
have
where you
two
lose me.
dedicated lanes, off of the main road to turn in there with the traffic light just for the Buc-ee's.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty insane, but the food there is spectacular.
Yeah.
And the bathrooms are very clean, but you have to wait in line
What's
to
your
get into
favorite
them.
food item?
They have a brisket sandwich that's just amazing.
But does it compare to the McRib?
Good question, Megan.
I mean, if they sold a McRib at Buc-ee's, that would be just like the best thing ever.
Never would have pegged a brisket sandwich with a gas station.
I mean,
tough.
it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
incredible.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was this idea of buying. No one plans to go into a gas station when they're doing a restroom break and spending $135,
Right.
but it happens all the time at
Yeah.
Buc-ee's. So that was the first question. Second one is, am I frequently unsatisfied with what I have and always wanting the latest or trendiest items? And you just talked about comparison, and that's basically what that is.
Mm-hmm.
So if you struggle with, just always thinking that you need whatever the next trend is, then consumerism probably has you. Do I equate my happiness or self-worth with the possessions that I own? There's a little cross-pollination between question 2 and 3, but if you think like the next purchase is the next, that's your ticket to being satisfied, which, I mean, it's hard not to fall into that trap sometimes.
Well, and I think with like social media
Yeah.
and like our online shopping ability, like
Yeah.
all of that, like you mentioned to Amazon.
Yeah.
I loved your Amazon. Like,
Yeah.
do you feel like you come home to like surprise?
Surprise party every day.
remember
You're
what
like,
you
man, this is great. I wonder what's in there. Yeah.
Yeah. But like that whole thing, like it's so easy to just shopping. All of the things are
All the
it's all so easy. And like
Yeah.
when we're on social media and like you see like all of these things that like you can just, it's at our fingertips all
Yep.
of the time.
Yep.
Like we don't even know what we're buying half
Yeah.
the time. We don't know. We can't even keep up with it.
Yeah.
So like all of that has become just the ease of things.
Yeah, for sure.
Has made it so difficult.
Yeah. So one of for me personally, this has helped me to buy less. So I'm a book guy. So like I love books. I only read about 20, 25 a year. But I want to read, I could read there's 100 books a year I want to buy.
Same.
So like even this morning, there was a book that got mentioned on that podcast I went to Amazon, I looked at the table of contents. I was like, oh man, this would be such a good book. And I've got a list of like 10 books that I have to read these. Like I've written them down because I keep pushing them down on my list. So what I've started doing is just like I create lists and I add them to my wish list, like my personal wish list, and then I don't buy them. So my book wish list is crazy, ridiculous long.
You should do like what the teachers do. Like before
There you
before
go.
the
Buy me
ministry year
books.
starts.
Yeah.
Here's my,
I'm not
my
going to do that.
classroom.
Yeah.
wish
So,
list.
but if I throw it on the wish list, then I don't buy it.
Yeah.
But I still have the satisfaction of clicking on it.
There you go.
And I can go and look at my wish list, and it's almost like looking at my bookshelf. It's a very similar feeling.
That's
Do
not,
Hoopla.
Yeah. Well, they're not all on Hoopla.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Hoopla is I do Hoopla
When you can.
when I can, but there's so many books that are on my list that are not on Hoopla.
Yeah.
You do the same with cars. You and you're like looking
I
at
do.
the.
I do that with cars too. So yeah, that's which would be a much more expensive habit than books.
True.
But yeah, there's, I do bring a trailer every day. I spend about 10 minutes looking at an email with all the cars that I would love to have, and they're all on auction.
Right.
So it's the closing 130 cars a day or whatever. And so I usually have about 2 or 3 cars a day that I get a text message.
Yeah.
This auction's ending in 30 minutes, and I'll go and look at the final
So I
price of the
can't.
thing.
I can't tell. You've either beaten this whole consumerism thing, or that's like real torture. What you're doing
No,
to
it's
yourself.
it's like it's entertainment.
tell.
It's for me. It's an entertainment
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
There you go.
And I don't accidentally bid on things like I used
That's
to.
good. Yeah, he did do that.
I did accidentally buy a motorcycle on eBay once
That happened.
because I was bidding just
That's
for
incredible.
fun, and then I ended up being the high bidder
Because you like to click. The
Yeah,
click
right.
is satisfying.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
and then
Back in
you
eBay days.
got
yeah, back in whatever
The height of eBay days.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
still
eBay
around.
I mean,
It's
it's
still-
still around.
My
yeah.
husband still buys
Really?
and sells on eBay.
Okay.
It's a real thing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hear as much about it,
Right. Yeah.
but it is still a thing. The last question was: are my financial decisions negatively impacting my savings, debt levels, or ability to give to others?
Yeah. So those were just like some really great questions to be asking.
Yeah.
And I also really appreciated that you talked about like how people feel about you talking about it
Right.
from
Yeah.
stage.
Yeah, I almost
And-
anytime I talk about money or generosity, I have to lay out that disclaimer
Yeah.
because I know there are people who immediately feel like I'm not going to listen to this guy because
Right.
I know Christians talking about money
Yeah.
is always bad.
Pastors
news.
talking about it,
Yeah.
about it from stage,
Yeah.
what they were thinking that you were going to go into from there.
Yep.
I think that was just a really good thing. And instead, you went into 1 Timothy 6
Yeah.
passage, and you really were purposeful about talking to not just the follower of Jesus, but talking to someone who isn't the follower of Jesus.
Right.
So can you talk through the importance of this desire to grow in generosity to everyone?
Yeah.
Not just the person who's following Jesus, but just how it's relevant to everybody.
Yeah, and that's the thing about the teachings of Christ is like if they're true, they will work no matter who you are. Mm-hmm. And the principles that Jesus taught on money was don't hoard it, don't, like not outside of the 1 Timothy 6 passage, because Paul's really just elaborating on the teachings of Jesus here in this passage that we looked at. But Jesus was like, don't store up treasure where rust and, loss happen. Instead, invest in the future. And you do that through generosity. That's what Jesus taught. So this teaching of Paul is an elaboration on that. And the principle is people who are generous tend to live richer lives. That's just a fact. There's all kinds of research that's been done that generous people live better lives than people who are stingy. And Megan's happier today, not trying to keep people locked out of her room. That's stressful and anxiety
right.
driving, right? So, if you're trying to hoard, that's like the picture of Scrooge is like the perfect picture of like a life of someone who's miserly versus the life of someone who is generous. And that's it's such a great movie, play, all the things. But it's also just a real depiction of a stingy person versus a generous person. The generous person lives a better life. That's just a fact.
Yeah. I mean, and that's true, like what we see just in culture. Like you even mentioned it yesterday. I mean, the person who goes after all of the things, like all of the wealth, all of the, going after the biggest, best job, like they climb the corporate ladder and they have all of the money, like they still end up empty.
Yeah.
And so it's not a principle that just applies to the Christ follower. It is a principle that
Correct.
goes
Yeah.
across the board.
Yeah, and I quoted from some research that was done. It wasn't Christian-driven research. It was university-driven research, and I mean that's what the research finds. Yeah.
So you stole the big idea.
I did steal the big idea
Which
from
is-
the title of the article.
Right. So
I
was
left out a word. I think the title of the article was "Generosity Literally Pays."
oh, okay. So the big idea was it pays to be generous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So you just talked basically about the legacy of generosity. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what Dorcas taught us.
Yeah.
She just left a
She
legacy
did.
of generosity. And you said when you see what your generosity does, it often encourages even more generosity.
Yeah.
So just as we wrap up, I'd love to talk about what steps we can take to leave a legacy of generosity. If you guys have some ideas or what you guys are doing to build a legacy of generosity in your own families, in your own lives, that are just some practical things that you're doing.
Yeah, I think as Jamie showed us yesterday, we can teach. That's a practical step of generosity that gets lost in today's culture. We can teach our kids and our family, our friends. We can live by example and teach that way. But to use somebody in the Bible, an extraordinary nobody, to show what generosity does all the way up until the funeral and what happens at her funeral. And it's incredible because I think at a young age when kids go for even that transition from high school on into the real world, if you ask them that question, then if you had asked me that question, then my definition of legacy was skewed right off the bat. It was tied to wealth. And
Yeah.
personal
Your legacy
wealth.
was your achievements.
Yes,
Right.
absolutely. And now, just getting older and learning and having those teachers in my life to know what true legacy is before I can then teach it. I wouldn't have wanted to teach it when I was 22.
Yeah. Yeah. So her legacy is, all these people that were touched by her generosity, and just that, thought of like, who's going to show up at your funeral to say, yeah, this person did this for me. Like we all want that. Like, I think, if you think, wasn't it the how to win and influence people,
Yeah.
whatever. Like one of his stories that he tells in that book is the story of the funeral. Like imagine your own funeral and what are people going to say? Like live your life in that kind of way that your funeral is the kind of funeral that you want to have. Like we all have this idea of what we want our lives to be about and what we want to be thought of or remembered of, or even while we're alive, like to be thought of, like this is a person who does these good things. I want to be around that kind of person because they do those kinds of things. We all have an idea of what that is, but we don't all organize our lives around that. And, I don't know if Dorcas lived her life in such a way that her funeral was going to be spectacular, but it was way more spectacular than she ever thought if she did, because she came out alive at the end of the funeral, which was pretty remarkable. But yeah, I just think, organizing your life around how you, like, that's legacy. Legacy is the difference your life made. And the only way that your life really makes a difference is if you pour it out on others. And that's like an investment of your time, your energy, the things that you give attention to, and the resources that you lay out. That's how legacy happens. And it's one of the things that I love. Like I was drawn to, I wanted to go to France to be a church planter, to establish new churches. I ended up not doing that. I ended up being a church revitalizer. But one of the things that I loved about the idea of church planting, and it turns out, like I'm doing some of it anyway, like Believers is never really about me. And long after I'm gone, there's this church that's continuing to tell people about Jesus. And, no one will remember Jamie was one of the pastors. 50 years from now, no one's going to know that. Just like no one knows who the first 3 pastors of this church were. But the church will continue, and that's part of legacy. And so people who are involved in doing things here, like that's legacy. And I hope the story of Dorcas is one that inspires that type of thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have anything else, Megan?
I mean, this is really small, but I feel like it's a small, tangible example. This past week, we had a front patio put in. It's been like on my little checklist of home things I wanted us to do. And one morning, I picked my son up from therapy, and as soon as I picked him up, he's like, I want a donut. I'm like, okay, you know what? I got to run to the bank. We'll swing in and get you a duck donut. But then it hit me. I'm like, oh, I'm already here. Why don't I grab some donuts for the guys that are doing the patio? And so we get our duck donuts, head home, and this is a little bit of a confession. When I don't really want to do something, I make Waverly do it. I make my 7-year-old do it. So I'm like, here.
I mean, I did that all the time.
Waverly, go give these to the guys outside. And he's like, can I have one? I'm like, no, they're for the guys outside. And so he goes, and I watch him out the window, and he goes and hands it to him, and it just like made their day. And so I use that as a little teaching moment with Waverly. Like, you see something like really small. Notice how many times that they thanked us as we were like leaving and coming. And I said, you can do something so small, and it can really change a person's day.
Yeah, so good.
I think that's a great example, because we often talk, when we teach on this subject, we encourage the incremental steps when we start talking practical steps. So I think it's worth mentioning here too.
Yep.
Like the incremental small steps like that go such a long way and inspiring you to adapt generosity.
Yeah, I said that yesterday at the close. I was like, even if you like do something today that is, it doesn't matter how small it is, just do something. And it doesn't even matter where. Like, you can do it here, that's great. But you could buy donuts for the, for the people at your house, or someone else, like the person in the line behind you or whatever. Just do something to be generous.
Yep.
I had the privilege of praying with someone after service yesterday, and she was sharing with me that she had lost a really good friend yesterday morning, who she was like, she was Dorcas in my life. Like, she just made herself so available to me through a really like dark period of my life. She just pointed me to Jesus. She made herself like, she opened her home to me. She introduced me to Jesus. She helped me get out of this season that I was in. Like, all of these things. Like, she was Dorcas in my life. Yeah. And she went home to be with Jesus yesterday morning, and she was just really captured by the message. And she was like, and now I just want to keep doing that. Yeah. And a legacy. I was like, yeah, how great is that? Like, she has just inspired you to keep that going. Yeah. And that's it, right? That encapsulates the whole thing. Yep. So what a great way to end today's podcast. We just want to thank you guys for being here today, and we hope that you'll join us as we wrap up this series this Sunday for one service at 10 o'clock, and then hang out afterwards for our little cookout. And then we start Less is More on September 8th, and we hope that you will join us if you happen to have any friends that could use a little bit less in their life. I don't know if you do, but I know I sure do. So you'll join us on September the 8th at 9 and 10:45. And we're always here on YouTube at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Thanks for being here, friends. Go and be love.